couldn't help but wonder, when did getting older turn into something women felt the need to hide, while men were allowed to grow into it? Not just accept it, but actually become more of who they are because of it. Because when you really look at it, aging men feels like expansion. The older they get older, and somehow the world makes more room for them, more credibility, more authority, more space to speak, to lead, to be seen. But for women, aging can feel like contraction, like the room slowly gets quieter when you walk in, like the spotlight shifts, not dramatically, but just enough to notice it's no longer on you. And no one says it out loud. That's what makes it so disorienting. Because you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't disappear. You didn't shrink. But somehow, it can feel like the world decided you did. And I think that's the moment that stays with you. Not the first wrinkle, not the gray hair, but the first time you feel overlooked. It might be in a conversation where your voice gets talked over in a way it never used to, or in a room where attention naturally moves toward someone younger without anyone even realizing it. Or even in something as simple as a compliment that used to come easily and now comes with a qualifier. And you might sit there thinking, wait a minute, when did this change? And here's the part we don't talk about enough. It's not just what the world sees, it's what we start doing to ourselves because of it. We adjust, we soften our opinions, we question our relevance. We wonder if we should be showing up differently, dressing differently, speaking differently. We start editing ourselves before anyone else even has the chance to. And that quiet self-editing, that's where the real shift happens. Because it's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly convinces you to take up a little less space than you used to. And the hardest part? The hardest part is that most of us don't even realize that we're even doing it. Because we've spent decades being conditioned to be aware of how we're perceived, to be likable, to be attractive, to be acceptable. And aging interrupts all of that. It asks a question most of us were never prepared to answer. Who are you when you're no longer being measured the same way? I mean, I know I was never asked that question. And that question can feel unsettling because for a long time, whether we realized it or not, some part of our identity was tied to being seen. So when the way we're seen changes, it can feel like we're losing something. But what if we're not losing anything at all? What if we're just being invited to see ourselves differently? Because here's what I've started to notice. There's a second shift that happens. Quieter than the first, but so much more powerful. It doesn't happen the moment you notice the change. It happens the moment you stop resisting it. The moment you realize you don't actually want to spend the rest of your life trying to hold on to a version of yourself that already lived her chapter. And that's where something unexpected shows up. Not fear, not loss, but clarity. Clarity about what matters. clarity about what doesn't, clarity about who you are when you're no longer performing for approval. And that's why I find it so interesting when I see women like Kate Winslet talk about wanting to recognize their own face in the mirror, to not erase the evidence of a life lived, but to actually see it, to be able to look at themselves and think, there I am. Or another celebrity, Cameron Diaz, who stepped out of the spotlight at the height of everything and came back not chasing relevance, but grounded in something deeper. Like, she made peace with the idea that she doesn't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. And again, this isn't about choosing one path over another. If someone chooses Botox, fillers, anything at all that makes them feel good, that's their decision, and it's a valid one. But what's worth paying attention to is the why behind any choice. Is it coming from confidence or is it coming from pressure? Because those are two very different places. And I think for a long time, women weren't given the space to even ask that question. We were handed the expectation: stay young, look good, don't let them see the change. But what if we let them see it? What if we stopped treating aging like something that needed to be managed and started seeing it as something that had meaning? I am stumbling over my words today because those lines, they didn't come from nowhere. They came from laughing until you couldn't breathe, from crying when things didn't go the way you thought they would, from carrying things and people and responsibilities for years. They came from living. And I don't know about you, but there's something about that doesn't feel like something to erase. It feels like something to respect. And maybe the most radical thing a woman can do in a world that tells her to stay the same is to allow herself to change fully, openly, without apology. To not shrink, to not disappear, to not quietly step aside, but to stand in who she is now with the kind of presence that doesn't ask for attention, but naturally holds it. Because here's the truth, no one really says out loud. The power doesn't go away. It just changes form. It becomes less about how you're seen and more about how you see. Less about being chosen and more about choosing. And that's not a loss. That's a shift into something deeper, something steadier, something that doesn't fade the way youth does. And I can't help but wonder if we were never meant to stay young, but instead meant to grow into a version of ourselves that no longer needs permission to exist. What would happen if we stopped apologizing for that? What would happen if we finally let ourselves be fully seen? Not in spite of our age, but because of it. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real freedom begins.